Hello everyone, warm welcome to Super Coaching Regulatory Bodies YouTube channel by Testbook. My name is Madhav Sir. I welcome you all in the part 3 of Financial Stability Report presented by RBI in June 2025. We all know that this is a report which is presented twice a year, and this report has been presented in 3 chapters by RBI. So we have already done with chapter 1 in the part 1 as well as in part 2 of this session. Today in part 3 we will be completing chapter 2, and in part 4, which is going to happen on Sunday, we will be discussing the last part or the last chapter. Along with that, we will be solving around 20-25 MCQs on the same topic. So this is the way I have thought, this is the way I have planned that I will be completing the reports with you, and I'm pretty sure if this is the manner we are following or we are going to follow in the near future, it is going to help you a lot. But before I start the discussion, may I have a reply in the comment section that I'm audible, visible, everything is fine, we are good to go, so that we can begin the discussion without any further delay. So can I have a reply, can I have a thumbs up in the comment section that everything is fine, so that we can begin. So first of all guys, I'll give you a quick recap. We have already covered what is financial stability. Then we have already covered the prelude of this particular report from the forward statement given by Sanjay Balhotra ji. Then we have discussed that this report comprises of 3 chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2 and chapter 3. If you remember, chapter 1 has been already discussed, where we have analyzed different types of risk as well as the status of global economy, risk on global economy, domestic economy, its status as well as its risk. Then we have discussed the risk related to the global and domestic financial market, and in the end we have discussed about systematic risk survey. But in the previous session, if you remember, I haven't discussed about the banking system, the non-banking financial institutes status as well as risk, because I will be combining this part with the chapter 2 itself, as the chapter 2 says financial institutions soundness and resilience. So first of all, we'll discuss what are the risks which are prevailing on our banking sector as well as on our NBFCs. Then we'll discuss the status of our financial institutes, and even we'll discuss the result or how well our financial institutes are going to perform under the stress result, which has been under the stress test which has been done, and on the basis of that stress test, how well our financial institutes are going to perform in the near future. So all these things will be covered in today's session, and trust me, today's session, or I would say the chapter 2 of this particular report, is of great importance. It is of immense importance, so you cannot afford to leave this part 3 or chapter 2 of this particular report. You have to revise this report at least twice or thrice so that you can remember the data, and you need to understand each and every technical financial term which has been mentioned in this particular report, which will help you a lot, not only while answering the MCQ based questions, but also while answering the descriptive questions in the examination. So let's open up today's session with the chapter 2. So systematic risk survey related discussion was done in the previous session itself, and now I will be opening up my session from the second chapter, which talks about the financial institutions soundness and resilience. So how we are going to move in this session? In this session, I will be discussing with you the status of banking industry, which means what is the asset quality, what is the return on asset, what is the CAR, capital adequacy ratio, what is the tier 1 capital of the banking sector. Even we'll discuss the profitability of the banking sector. After discussing all this, or after discussing immense data related to the financial health of the banking sector of the country, then we'll discuss the result of stress test which was conducted on the banking sector. Then after banking sector, we'll move to NBFCs. After NBFCs, we'll also talk about mutual fund as well as insurance sector, and even in the end, we'll talk about the interconnectedness among the financial institutions. What is the criteria with respect to the same as well? Done, guys? Ready? This report is beneficial for all those examination where current affairs related questions are asked. So on that particular matter, MR, yes, I would say this report is important for all your upcoming examinations. So here we go with the first part. First, I'll discuss the overview of the financial sector of India. And if I talk about the overview of the financial sector without any data, if I give you an overview, it says that despite of global challenges, India's financial system has stayed strong as well as stable, which means because we all know that due to the global challenges which are pertaining, which include the geopolitical tensions, tariff war, as well as the geographical fragmentation. Under these tough times, Indian economy, Indian financial system has stayed strong as well as stable. Our banks as well as our NBFCs, our bank as well as our NBFCs, they have improved their capital and liquidity strength. I hope you all understand capital. Capital is the amount which is basically employed by the company in order to earn profit. The banking capital as per Basel is divided into three categories: tier 1, tier 2 and tier 3 capital, or tier 1, tier 2 and additional tier 1 capital. I'm sorry. So these are the three forms of capital. And then liquidity means the availability of cash or high quality liquid assets with the bank, which can be utilized in order to pay back the fund requirement. Bad loans, they have come down. We all know that our banking sector's gross NPA is decadal low, which is a good sign. NBFCs, they have witnessed a credit growth which is supported by better asset quality as well as strong capital and low interest rate. Obviously, due to the monetary policy easing, they are expecting to boost the lending in the near future, and this boosting of lending will result in increase in demand, and this increase in demand will result in increase in this increase in demand will result in increase in demand in the market, which will increase the pressure on the production houses, and uski wajah se production badhegi and the growth will increase. If I talk about the other part in this chapter, we will be discussing how our commercial banks are performing, what is the loan and deposit trend, what is the asset quality, that means gross NPA, net NPAs. Then we'll discuss what is large borrowers, what is the exposure to the large borrower. If you don't know, then I can explain you over here itself. Large borrower basically means the entity which has borrowed a sum of greater than 5 crore rupees. An entity which has borrowed a sum greater than 5 crore rupees from a bank, that particular entity will be termed as large borrower with respect to the bank. It will be termed as large borrower with respect to the bank. तो एक क्वेश्चन बन सकता है कि हम बल्क डिपॉजिट किसे कहते हैं सर? जब डिपॉजिट वैल्यू 3 करोड़ से ज्यादा हो. In general, we call it as bulk deposit. And who is termed as large borrower? So the one who has an exposure, or who a borrower to which a bank is exposed for a value of more than 5 crore rupees, we call it as a large borrower. Capital strength as well as profits of the bank will be discussed. We'll discuss the result of stress test, which will assess how banks are going to handle the difficult scenarios in the near future. Then we'll review the same for urban cooperative banks, we'll review the same for NBFCs, and even we'll analyze mutual funds, mutual fund companies, clearing corporations, as well as the insurance companies. In the end, we will examine how all these institutes, they are interconnected to each other. And how the stress on one institute or stress on one sector institutes is going to impact the other sectors as well. Got it, guys? So let's begin. So the first one is Indian banking sector. So if I talk about the Indian banking sectors, some of the keywords which you need to remember while answering the descriptive paper: banks, they have record high capital reserves. So if I talk about the banking reserves these days, it is record high. Along with, if we have record high capital, that means we have decent cushion to counter the losses, to counter the risk in the near future. And along with that, the asset quality is very premium what I'm trying to say, the level of bad loan is at its lowest in the decades, or it is at the lowest value if we compare from the past decades. Overall performance and profit of the banking sector has improved. Stress test shows that bank can handle the tough situation pretty well. The point is, what about NBFC? So NBFC sector has also seen resilient because of its asset quality has improved, capital buffer remained healthy, connection between the financial institutions like banks, NBFCs, mutual funds, they have grown rapidly, especially through mutual lending and exposure. What is this mutual lending and exposure? So it basically means when we talk about banks, we have a term that is known as interbank lending. Even we have inter-sector lending. So basically when banks, they borrow from each other in order to manage their overnight balances. Even NBFCs, they borrow from each other, or even NBFCs, they borrow from banks in order to manage their fund requirements. That is basically termed as mutual lending and exposure. Mutual lending and exposure का मतलब क्या हुआ? अब मान लो अगर बैंक ने NBFC को लोन दिया, so this is the mutual lending done by B1, that is bank 1, and bank 1 is having an exposure to the NBFC, क्योंकि अगर फ्यूचर में NBFC ने बैंक को लोन वापस नहीं किया, then in that particular case bank is going to witness the loss, bank is going to witness the credit risk. Now I open up the data part, the fact part. So the first one is deposit and credit growth of the scheduled commercial banks. The moment I use this word scheduled commercial banks, I'm talking about public sector banks, I'm talking about private sector banks, I'm talking about foreign banks. They all fall under the same category, that is scheduled commercial bank. So in terms of deposit growth for the financial year 2024-25 on year basis, we have witnessed 10.7%. We have witnessed 10.7% of deposit growth, which means in comparison to the previous year, the deposit with the scheduled commercial banks has increased by 10.7%. It has increased by 10.7%. But if I talk about specific data as on 13th June 2025, if I compare it to 13th June 2024, then this growth is 10.5%. So this is just for your reference. This is nothing to memorize, don't remember it. If I talk about term deposits as well as CASA, CASA means current account and saving account. These are the demand deposits. Guys, tell me an answer. For a bank, what kind of deposit is beneficial? Term deposit or CASA deposit? Then my answer is, sir, term deposit is important for a bank because it is more stable. It is more stable funding with the bank, which can be utilized for lending purpose quite comfortably. On the other side, demand deposit, it is a volatile funds with the bank. It is a volatile funds with the bank, but it is also favorable because of low rate of interest on it. We know that on current account, rate of interest is 0. And in case of saving account, it is around 3%. So in that particular case, demand deposit is favorable because of low rate of interest. Term deposit is favorable because of stable funding or stable source of fund. But if I have to choose one, then I would say CASA deposit is more important for a bank in comparison to term deposit, because CASA deposit will lead to good value or a decent value of NIM, that is net interest margin. What is net interest margin? So that is basically difference between average lending rate of the bank minus average deposit rates of the bank. So let's suppose bank has deposit of 1,000 rupees in current account, saving account, and the average deposit for the entire average rate of interest or the average return for the entire deposit is 5%, and the loan given in different categories out of that fund is 12%. So net interest margin is 7. But in case of term deposit, this average deposit rate in case of term deposit like FD and RD, it is around, let's say, 8%. I'm just saying an example. If it is 8%, then undoubtedly the NIM will fall down to 4%. So bank के लिए important क्या है? Profit. Bank के लिए important क्या है? Spread. So spread is high, NIM is high in case of what? Sir, in case of demand deposit. So obviously bank will try to hold huge value of CASA deposit, but that doesn't mean that bank will focus only and only on increasing its CASA deposit. That is not a good call, because in that case, bank will land, or bank will end up with volatile funds, which will result in difficulty in the process of asset liability management. So term deposit is growing faster in comparison to CASA deposit. Why? Because today, in these days, we have witnessed that the return in the past, because of the increase, because of the high repo rate in the initial days, I talk about not the last 3 months, I'm talking about last 9 months. In the last 9 months, if the repo rate was high, lending rate was high, and if lending rate is high, obviously the rate of interest on the deposits will be high. So term deposit was a good call to save your funds in the banking industry, and that is the reason term deposit has grown in the past as per the report. Credit growth is 9.6%. So on one side, we have a deposit growth of 10.7%, and we have a deposit growth, credit growth of 9.6%, which is good enough. क्योंकि आपके पास जो deposit है, that is increasing by 10.7, you have increased your credit by 9.6, which is good. That means still you have liquidity with you, still the bank has the liquidity in order to manage its demand, or in order to manage in order to service its liabilities. Now, if I talk about credit growth of public sector bank with respect to private sector banks, so private sector bank has outpaced, public sector banks has outpaced private banks for the very first time in over a decade. So if I talk about credit growth of public sector bank is greater than credit growth witnessed for the private banks, and this has happened for the very first time in the decade. So this is a good point which you need to remember. Is this point clear, guys? Is this point clear? आपको लग रहा होगा कि सर कितना डेटा है, कैसे याद करेंगे, कैसे होगा? ट्रस्ट मी गाइज, अगर आपने ये रिपोर्ट एक बार डाउनलोड करके देखी ना, जिसमें आपके पास 171 पेजेस हैं, you won't even understand कि शुरू कहाँ से करूँ. So I have presented this data in a tabular form. It takes a lot of effort so that I can present the data in a readable and consumable manner. अब इसके बाद की ड्यूटी आपकी है, you have to revise it again and again so that you can retain the data pretty well. Now the same which I have just discussed, now I have a pictorial view. As I said, deposit growth rate for all the scheduled commercial banks 10.7%, growth rate of CASA in comparison to term deposit. So CASA growth rate, as you can see, it is 6.2%, but the growth rate of term deposit is 12.5%, which means the term deposit growth rate is almost 2 times the growth rate of CASA deposits. Then if I talk about the credit growth, so credit growth is around 11% for all the scheduled commercial banks. It is around 11%. But if I talk about the composition, composition का मतलब जो बैंक्स ने लोन दिया उसमें ज्यादा हिस्सा किसे दिया, ध्यान से अगर आप देखें तो सबसे बड़ा जो हिस्सा है that is 29.8, which means to the service sector. So to the services, 29.8% of the entire loan is given, lending is done. उसके बाद सबसे बड़ा जो हिस्सा है that is personal loan, that is personal loan, and on the second we have service sector. तो ये क्वेश्चन आ सकता है, if I talk about scheduled commercial bank, credit given by the scheduled commercial bank is given highest. Percentage is not important, लेकिन इसका ये जो flow है that is important. So highest loan is given for personal loan category. On the second rank we have service sector. Then on the third rank we have industrial sector. Then on the fourth rank we have is agriculture sector, and then on the last we have others. So this is how you need to remember this flow. That is more than sufficient. Data important नहीं है, data बस वो याद रखना जो मैंने यहाँ पे आपको mention करके दिया है. ठीक है जी, clear हो गई बात, समझ आ गया? I hope this point is very much clear to everyone. Now moving on to the next point. The next point is sectoral credit trend. अगर हम sectoral credit trend की बात करें, just for your reference, don't remember, this is the slide which you need to read only. So industry or agriculture sector share in total credit has declined in comparison to the previous year, which means the demand for agricultural loan, the demand for industrial loan has decreased in comparison to demand for personal loan and service loan has increased because it has witnessed higher credit growth rate. Industrial loan showed slight revival in March 2025. Personal loan, it is a broad based loan which is decelerating, मतलब बढ़ तो रहा है लेकिन जितनी तेजी से पहले बढ़ रहा था अब उतनी तेजी से नहीं बढ़ रहा. अगर मान लो पहले growth rate was 10% and after that the growth rate was 15%, after that the growth rate is 18%. So this gap which was earlier 5%, now this gap has reduced to 3%. So the rate by which the personal loan is growing, the personal credit growth is happening, that is in a decelerating manner. So the main credit drivers are none other than personal loan and service sector. These are the major sectors which have borrowed major chunk of the loan from your scheduled commercial banks. This is the entire picture. Again, this is not to read anything, not to remember anything. It is again for your reference. बस ये ट्रेंड अगर आपको याद रहे, you will be able to write a good descriptive answer. नहीं याद रहता, then also it's fine. Then also it is fine. This is very important. ये data बहुत important है, very 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 important. So if I talk about this data, ऐसा format नहीं मिलेगा. Trust me guys, in this format you will not be able to find content on any platform. I can assure you, guarantee दे सकता हूँ क्योंकि काफी टाइम स्पेंड किया है इस डेटा को बनाने में. ग्रॉस एनपीए, व्हाट इज ग्रॉस एनपीए? सो ग्रॉस एनपीए बेसिकली मींस द एनपीए ऑफ द लोन ऑफ द बैंक डिवाइडेड बाय टोटल लोन गिवन बाय द बैंक, दैट इज टोटल एडवांसेस. तो टोटल एडवांसेस में से कितना लोन एनपीए डिक्लेयर हुआ है? सो दैट इज 2.3%, व्हिच इज मल्टी डिकेडल लो, व्हिच इज मल्टी डिकेडल लो. बट व्हाट इज नेट एनपीए? सो नेट एनपीए इज नथिंग बट इट इज ग्रॉस एनपीए minus provisioning. I hope you remember provisioning. We call it as credit provisioning, which is done by the banks, and the provisioning is done as per the characteristics of the asset. मतलब अगर आपकी asset standard asset है, provisioning is 1%. If it is substandard asset, then it will be 15% or 25%, depending upon whether it is secured or unsecured loan. Then if it is doubtful asset, then it will be 25%, 40%, 100% for secured loan, and it will be 100% from day one in case of doubtful asset category. If it is an unsecured loan or loss asset के case में, तो we don't have any other option. It will be undoubtedly what? It will be 100% only. तो अगर आप net NPA value को divide करेंगे total advances से, it is only and only 0.5%. This data is again very important. How many of you have heard about this particular term, that is slippage ratio? Have you heard this term? सुना है इस term के बारे में? Have you ever heard this term, slippage ratio? If yes, give a try. If yes, give a try. What do you understand by this particular ratio? Let's see who all can give me the answers. I'm giving you a few minutes. Type the answer. It is again a very important, I would say, financial term, as well as the data is also really very important. So I would love to discuss this, but before that I want you all to think twice that whether you are clear with this term. What is slippage ratio? Any idea? So whenever this question is asked to me that what do you understand by the word slippage ratio, then my answer to this particular question is slippage ratio is the rate. No. Okay, it's not reduction. It's not reduction. It is something else. It is not reduction. It is something else. I'm still waiting. Anyone else can give me the answer? Slippage ratio indices the rate at which good loans turn into NPA. It is calculated by dividing the fresh addition of NPAs during a period by the total standard asset. Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So what is slippage ratio? Aki, you were saying NPA reduction. It is basically NPA increase. तो जो आपका loan which is today in the category, which is today is in the category of standard asset. Now it has turned into NPA. So what is the percentage of loan which is turning? What is the percentage of loan which is turning from standard asset to substandard asset, or what is the increase of loan from standard to substandard asset is basically termed as slippage ratio. So jitna kam hoga slippage ratio, that would be better, है ना? I hope you are understanding this point कि slippage ratio jitna kam hoga utna better hoga for an economy, for a country, for a bank. So keeping that in mind, you should understand that slippage ratio ये जितना कम होगा उतना बेटर है. और स्लिपेज रेशियो एक ऐसा एस्पेक्ट है आपके बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री का जिसकी मदद से पॉलिसीज बनाई जाती हैं कि अगर स्लिपेज रेशियो ज़्यादा है, तो ऑब्वियसली आरबीआई, बैंक्स, दे शुड कम अप विद टाइट policies, tight norms regarding lending and managing their credit. And if it is low, that means it's going good. ठीक है जी, clear हो गया ये point? I hope this point is clear. Shall I move ahead? Okay, so if I say slippage ratio is 0.7%, it is stable. Provision coverage ratio. What is provision coverage ratio? Any idea? What is provision coverage ratio? Any idea? Whenever this question is asked that what is provision coverage ratio, then my answer is provision. Provision means credit provision, the provisions which you have made, the reserves which you have kept against NPA. I call it as NPA provisions. NPA provisions divided by gross NPA. मान लो बैंक का जो ग्रॉस एनपीए है वो है 100 रुपीज, उसके बदले में बैंक ने ऑलरेडी 60 रुपीज रिजर्व करके रखे हैं, देन इन दैट पर्टिकुलर केस आवर प्रोविजन कवरेज रेशियो इज 60%. 60% का मतलब कि भैया 60% ऑफ एनपीए तो हमारे पास ऑलरेडी रिजर्व है, सिर्फ 40% है जो हमें और रिक्वायर्ड है इन ऑर्डर टू मैनेज द लॉसेस इन द नियर फ्यूचर. लेकिन इंडिया में आज की डेट में इट इज 76.3%, बट इट इज स्लाइटली लोअर देन द सितंबर डेटा. अगला पॉइंट आता है राइट ऑफ टू ग्रॉस एनपीए. राइट ऑफ टू ग्रॉस एनपीए इज 31.8%. व्हाट इज राइट ऑफ? राइट ऑफ का एक बड़ा सिंपल एग्जांपल देता हूं, कभी नहीं भूलोगे राइट ऑफ होता क्या है. Whenever this question is asked, what is write off loan, what is write off asset, तो एक simple example सुनना. My father sent me to a market and he gave me 500 rupees कि जाओ सामान लेके आओ from the market. I went to the market, I purchased the goods and the price of the goods which I purchased was 200, and technically I was supposed to have 300 rupees in my pocket. The moment I reached back home, my father asked me, where is the stuff? I gave him. He asked me, where is the balance amount? The moment I gave him the amount, he counted it was 200, which means I have dropped a 100 rupee note somewhere while coming back. The moment I realized that I have dropped this 100 rupees while coming back and I don't want to get scolding from my father, what I did is from my emergency cash, the cash which we put in the inner side of our wallet, from that inner side of my wallet, I took out 100 rupees, which is my reserve, which is my past savings, and I added that 100 rupees while giving the funds to my father. And with respect to father, he has received the entire amount. According to him, the loss is zero. Similarly, when the loan turns into NPA and from NPA, it is declared as सब कैटेगरी अंडर एनपीए, दैट इज लॉस एसेट, विच मींस कि अब यहां से कोई रिकवरी तो हो नहीं सकती, एंड यू वांट टू रिमूव दिस लॉस एसेट, यू वांट टू रिमूव दिस बर्डन ऑफ एनपीए फ्रॉम योर एसेट साइड. व्हाट यू विल डू एज अ बैंक, फ्रॉम योर पास्ट रिजर्व्स और मे बी फ्रॉम योर प्रॉफिट, यू विल राइट ऑफ दिस लॉस एसेट. टेक्निकली लगेगा कि बैंक का एनपीए क्या हो गया, कम हो गया. सो टेक्निकली इट विल लुक लाइक that bank's NPA has reduced, but actually it has not reduced. father may feel that he has received 300 rupees, but actually I know that I have lost 100, but for father this is written off. I have written off the losses from my past savings, from my past reserves, from my profits. That is known as write off. तो जो आपका ग्रॉस एनपीए है, उस ग्रॉस एनपीए में से जो आपने राइट ऑफ किया उसका जो रेशियो है दैट इज वेरी हाई, दैट इज व्हाट 31.8%. मतलब ये वो पैसा है जिसकी रिकवरी नहीं हुई. वी वर नॉट एबल टू रिकवर दीज फंड्स एंड नाउ दिस फंड हैज बीन रिटन ऑफ फ्रॉम माय बैलेंस शीट, फ्रॉम द रिजर्व्स, फ्रॉम द प्रॉफिट्स. इज दिस पॉइंट क्लियर? इज दिस पॉइंट क्लियर? मजा आया? गिव मी यस सर. सो व्हाट वाज द की एनपीए रिडक्शन ड्राइवर? सर एनपीए रिड्यूस हुआ, वेरी गुड, लेकिन एनपीए रिड्यूस रिकवरी से नहीं हुआ. एनपीए रिड्यूस मेजर जो रिड्यूस हुआ वो राइट ऑफ से हुआ. और टेक्निकली देखें तो ये रिडक्शन है ही नहीं. इट इज बेसिकली अ काइंड ऑफ illusion which we are creating with respect to our balance sheet, which we are creating with respect to our balance sheet. देखो Aki, if I say whether it is good or bad, simple सी बात है, you are a business organization and if you are earning profit, that profit has been earned to counter your losses, and if you are doing it, it's okay. If you are doing it, it's okay. If you are doing it from your profits, then it is fine. But if you are borrowing the funds, if you are borrowing the funds and that borrowed amount is used to write off the loan, then it is not good. Then it is not good. Is this point clear? Technically this point is clear, Aki? If it is clear, give me yes sir. अगर ये पैसा मेरा अपना था तो ठीक है. अगर मैंने यही पैसा अपने फ्रेंड से मांगा होता just to showcase in front of my father that I have not made any mistake, but eventually I have to pay back this amount, this is still the liability on me. This is still the liability on me. Now this is the data. So out of this, 2.3% is the gross NPA. Net NPA ratio is 0.5%. Then slippage ratio is 0.7%. And lastly, if I talk about the provisioning coverage ratio, that is 76.3%. The four datas which I have encircled, they are really very important. बाकी आप छोड़ देना, कोई problem नहीं है. अगर चाहो तो बस एक ये ट्रेंड याद कर लेना. This trend is important. What does this trend say? This trend says highest gross NPA is with public sector banks, then with private banks, and lowest gross NPA percentage is with the foreign banks. इसका मतलब foreign banks ने जितना पैसा लोन पे दिया उसमें से काफी कम या सबसे कम परसेंटेज कन्वर्ट हुआ, और या फिर ये कहो कि चेंज हुआ इनटू एनपीए. और सबसे ज्यादा किसका लोन कन्वर्ट हुआ इनटू एनपीए? दैट इज पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक. अब सर आपने ज्यादा तो बोल दिया, बट ये है सिर्फ 2.8% ही, तो कंपैरिजन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इट इज ज्यादा, बट टेक्निकली इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द वैल्यू पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, इट इज डिसेंट, इट इज मैनेजेबल, इट इज एक्सेप्टेबल. दैट इज 2.8% ओनली. गॉट इट गाइस? क्लियर? मजा आया? मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. As I said, write off gross NPAs. So write off gross NPAs is 31.8%. बस ये डेटा याद रखना. Rest all is not important. Even I would say the trend is also not very important. But अगर आप देखना चाहें तो एक ट्रेंड को लिंक कर सकते हैं. सर आपने कहा था कि जो ग्रॉस एनपीए है वो सबसे ज्यादा किसका है? सर वो सबसे ज्यादा है पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स का, उसके बाद प्राइवेट बैंक्स का, और उसके बाद फॉरेन बैंक्स का. इसको अगर आप रिलेट करें, ओपन अप योर माइंड, आई एम नॉट हियर टू रीड द पीडीएफ, ओपन अप योर माइंड. नाउ इफ आई से राइट ऑफ टू ग्रॉस एनपीए रेशियो, इट इज हाईएस्ट फॉर प्राइवेट बैंक्स, देन फॉर फॉरेन बैंक्स, एंड देन फॉर पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक्स. तो ऑब्वियस ही बात है सर, अगर आपका राइट ऑफ टू जी ग्रॉस एनपीए रेशियो ज्यादा है तो ऑटोमेटिकली योर ग्रॉस एनपीए विल बी लो. ऑटोमेटिकली योर ग्रॉस एनपीए विल बी लो. समझ आई ये बात? अगर आपने राइट ऑफ ही ज्यादा कर दिया अपने लोन को आउट ऑफ दी टोटल एनपीए, तो ऑब्वियसली आपका जो बचा हुआ एनपीए वो तो कम होगा ही ना, और बचा हुआ कम एनपीए है तो वो ऐसा दिखेगा. तो पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक ने उतनी तेजी से कम नहीं किया जितनी तेजी से प्राइवेट या फिर फॉरेन बैंक्स ने कम किया है. तो एक लिंक आप रख सकते हैं विच इज इंपॉर्टेंट. द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज सेक्टर वाइज ट्रेंड इन टर्म्स ऑफ असेट क्वालिटी. मतलब कि कौन सी कैटेगरी को कौन से सेक्टर में दिया लोन सबसे ज्यादा एनपीए हुआ है. तो अगर आप ध्यान से देखें, इट्स रियली वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. ग्रॉस एनपीए रेशियो की अगर आप बात करें, एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर के जो लोन्स हैं दे आर 6.1% ग्रॉस एनपीए। मतलब अगर आपने 100 रुपए लोन दिया एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर को, उसमें से 6.1 रुपीज टर्न्स इनटू एनपीए, which is 2.3 for industries, 2 for service sector and 1.2 for personal loan. This is pretty good. Again, this flow is important कि सबसे ज्यादा लोन जो एनपीए हो रहा है वो एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर का, फिर इंडस्ट्रियल सेक्टर का, फिर सर्विस सेक्टर का, और लोएस्ट एनपीए परसेंटेज किसकी है? सो दैट इज पर्सनल लोन। अब अगला एक पॉइंट आया, स्ट्रेस्ड एडवांसेस रेशियो। व्हाट इज दिस स्ट्रेस्ड एडवांसेस रेशियो? एनी आइडिया? Any idea, guys, how you define stress advances ratio? Can you give me the answer? I tell you, stress advances ratio is basically the ratio of total non-performing and standard restructured advances divided by total loan. ध्यान से सुनना, ध्यान से सुनना. Before I discuss this point, I would like to add a slide over here. Just give me a second. I hope आप लोगों को जल्दी नहीं है, मुझे तो जल्दी नहीं है. मैं चाहता हूं कि आपको चीजें थोड़ी डिटेल में अच्छे से पढ़ा दूं. आई होप यू आर गोइंग टू स्टे विद मी टिल द एंड ऑफ दिस वीडियो. सो इफ आई टॉक अबाउट स्ट्रक्चर्ड स्टैंडर्ड, if I talk about standard restructured advances, standard restructured advances, इस पॉइंट को समझने के लिए I'll use only one word, that is restructured asset. I'll take a very simple example for this. Guys, let's suppose my loan has been declared as NPA. I have borrowed a loan and now my loan has been declared as NPA. The moment my loan has declared as NPA, bank officials approached to me and they said, sir क्या कर रहे हो, EMI दो, ये हो जाएगा वो हो जाएगा. मैंने कहा भाई क्या करूं, पैसा ही नहीं है, I don't have funds. My business is not going good. From where I can pay back my loan, from where I can pay back my EMI? Then bank officials say, let us review your repayment capacity, because when we lended the amount, we have reviewed your repayment capacity and that time it was pretty good. The moment they reviewed my repayment capacity, they came to know that yes, he is not lying, his repayment capacity is low, which means he is not in a position to pay back the EMI. And if he'll not pay back the EMI, this loan will turn into loss asset. And if it turns into loss asset, then obviously it is a big loss for the bank. It is a big loss for the bank. So in order to avoid this loss, what will bank do? Bank will ask the customer कि sir कोई बात नहीं, don't worry, आपके बुरे दिन हैं, we are with you. Bank give a proposal that let's increase time period of your loan. Let's decrease lending rate of your loan, because of which your EMI will fall down. So whenever loan parameters are revised, whenever loan parameters are revised within the tenor of the loan, not before loan initiation, but within the tenor of the loan, if the loan parameters are revised, we call that asset as restructured asset. और ये जो restructured asset है, it will be standard asset. क्यों? क्योंकि भैया जैसे ही आपने EMI की वैल्यू कम की, मैंने आकर EMI दे दी और मेरा लोन जो NPA हो सकता था, मान लो कि वो लोन मैंने 2 इंस्टॉलमेंट्स मिस की थी, तीसरी मिस करने से पहले जो NPA हो सकता था, उससे पहले ही बैंक के साथ ये restructuring हुआ and I gave the installment which escaped my loan to be declared as NPA, but that loan will be termed as standard asset. But not only standard, it is restructured asset. So this standard restructured asset is again a stress on the bank. Stress in 2 forms. अब आप कहोगे बैंक को स्ट्रेस क्यों है? सो बैंक को टेंशन है इस लोन की, स्ट्रेस है इस लोन का बिकॉज ऑफ 2 रीजंस. पहला रीजन है कि बैंक का जो निम है, नेट इंटरेस्ट मार्जिन, वो कम हो गया क्योंकि बैंक ने लेंडिंग रेट्स कम कर दिए. सो बैंक के लिए एक स्ट्रेस तो ये आ गया, पॉइंट ऑफ वरी ये आ गया. और दूसरा पॉइंट ऑफ वरी ये है कि अगर ये इंडिविजुअल वाज नॉट पेइंग द लोन अर्लियर, maybe there is a possibility he may not pay the loan after few months again. So this is something which is not very I would say smooth for a bank. It is a kind of stress, it is a kind of tension for the bank. So this include standard restructured asset, और जो आपका gross NPA है वो तो बैंक पे टेंशन है ही, वो तो बैंक पे टेंशन है ही, उस पर तो कोई प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं है। तो स्ट्रेस असेट बेसिकली मींस व्हाट? सो स्ट्रेस असेट basically means, please pay attention. So stressed asset basically means gross NPA plus restructured asset. और जब आप इसे डिवाइड करते हैं with total loan, when you divide it with total advances, with total loan, तो जो रेशियो निकल के आएगा, that ratio is known as what? Sir, it is known as stressed, it is known as stressed advances ratio. Stressed advances ratio. तो it's quite obvious कि जो stressed advances ratio है, it is always greater than gross NPA. Do you agree? अरे ये हमेशा ग्रॉस एनपीए से ज्यादा ही होगा। क्यों? क्योंकि सर ग्रॉस एनपीए में तो हमने एनपीए ले ही लिया, हमने एनपीए तो ले ही लिया, टोटल एनपीए तो ले ही लिया, उसके साथ साथ वी हैव आल्सो एडेड द रीस्ट्रक्चर्ड एसेट। तो अगर न्यूमरेटर बढ़ा तो ओवरऑल रेशियो भी क्या होगी? बड़ी ही होगी। सो इन दैट पर्टिकुलर केस यू नीड टू रिमेंबर, in that particular case you need to कहाँ गया वो पॉइंट? आई मिस समवेयर, आई गेस कहीं मिस कर दिया मैंने, है ना? जस्ट गिव मी अ सेकंड। This stressed advance ratio which is now on your screen, it is again highest for agriculture, 3% for industry. Trend is exactly the same, trend same है, trend is same, but values are high because of addition of stressed asset, because of addition of stressed asset. Logical है, समझ आ रहा होगा, visualize करा दिया with the help of the graph. That must be clear now. If it is clear, just give me yes sir so that we can move ahead. If it is clear, just give me yes sir so that we can move ahead. Chalo, moving on to the next point. The next point talks about share in total scheduled commercial bank gross NPAs. किसकी बात हो रही है? So we are now talking about large borrowers. As I said earlier, now I will be defining this point once again. Large borrower is defined as one who has a aggregate fund based as well as non-fund based exposure of 5 crores and above to any single commercial bank, to any single commercial bank. तो इसका मतलब एक entity है, I'm talking about an entity. This entity has borrowed 3 crore rupees from RBI. This is fund based exposure, and SBI has also given 2 crore rupees of guarantee to PNB against the loan given by PNB to this entity. तो PNB ने लोन दिया लेकिन PNB को ट्रस्ट नहीं था, तो PNB ने कहा जाओ किसी को गारंटर लेके आओ. सो दिस एंटिटी वेंट टू SBI और SBI को कहा सर मेरे गारंटर बन जाओ. SBI बन गया. तो अब SBI का फंड ऑब्लिगेशन या फंड एक्सपोजर कितना? 3 करोड़. नॉन फंड एक्सपोजर कितना? 2 करोड़. तो टोटल एक्सपोजर कितना? 5 करोड़. तो अगर आपका टोटल एक्सपोजर एक सिंगल कमर्शियल बैंक पे 5 करोड़ या उससे ज्यादा है, you will be termed as what? You will be termed as large borrowers. So share in total scheduled commercial banks gross NPA, तो total NPA में से 37.5% is the borrowings done by large borrowers. And if I include overall total credit given by the banking sector, then it is 43.9%. Gross NPA ratio is 3.8%. It was 3.8% in September 2023. Now it has declined to 1.9%, which is good. आपका भले ही रेशियो या परसेंटेज 37.5 है, बट कितने लार्ज बोरोवर्स के लोन एनपीए हो रहे हैं? सो दैट इज 1.9% ओनली, विच इज बिलो द ओवरऑल वैल्यू ऑफ 2.3%. देन वी हैव top 100 borrowers share in advance. So top borrowers या टॉप 100 बोरोवर्स शेयर इन एडवांस इज 15.2%। तो जो आपके बड़े बड़े बोरोवर्स हैं, योर हाई नेटवर्थ बोरोवर्स, उनका शेयर टोटल लोन में 15.2% है, एंड आउट ऑफ देम नन ऑफ द लोन is in the category of NPA. Out of them, none of their loan is in the category of NPA. तो यहाँ पर अगर मैं कहूँ this data is important, this is important, या इसको आप छोड़ सकते हैं, I'll just mark it so that you can learn accordingly. So this is important, this is important, उसमें भी बस ये याद रखना, and this is important. Rest you can ignore. Rest you can ignore. Now, मूविंग ऑन टू द कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो। ये जानी पहचानी टर्म है, सबको याद है, बहुत बार पढ़ा दिया। तो कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो इज बेसिकली कैपिटल टू RWA, कैपिटल टू RWA रेशियो, which is supposed to be 9% according to RBI. In case of CCB, it is 2.5%. And if asked by RBI, then it would be counter cyclical capital buffer, again 0 to 2.5%. अगर मैं highest भी मानूं, which is 11.5, let's suppose RBI has also, जो कि नहीं है, current financial year में RBI said that there is no need to maintain counter cyclical buffer. Let's suppose RBI said to maintain, and that to the highest value, this comes out to be 14%. But overall, capital adequacy ratio of the banks is 17.3%, which is all-time high. And if you compare it with 11.5%, which is pretty huge, मतलब 11.5 होना चाहिए था टेक्निकली, और इससे भी अगर ज्यादा होगा स्ट्रेस में भी तो 14% होगा, बट स्टिल बैंक्स आर मेंटेनिंग 17.3% of their value as what, sir, as capital adequacy ratio, or bank's capital adequacy ratio is 17.3%. If I talk about only and only tier 1 capital, in case of tier 1 capital, it is supposed to be 5.5% for capital adequacy ratio. If I add for capital conservation buffer, that is 2.5%. तो at max कितना होना चाहिए सर? at max होना चाहिए कितना? that is 8%. that is 8%. but technically 5.5 चाहिए था। अगर मैं CCB को भी इंक्लूड कर लूं तो ये 2.5% और ऐड कर लिया, तो टेक्निकली हाईएस्ट 8 चाहिए था, बट बैंक्स आर होल्डिंग 14.7%, which is again a good call. Again, this data is important. Tier 1 leverage ratio is stable at 7.9%. What is leverage ratio over here? Any idea? Any idea? तो सर अगर आपसे कोई पूछे इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में व्हाट इज लिवरेज रेशियो, सो रिमेंबर दैट सर लिवरेज रेशियो इज बेसिकली कैपिटल ऑफ द बैंक, लेट्स से टियर 1 कैपिटल ऑफ द बैंक डिवाइडेड बाय टोटल रिस्क, नॉट रिस्क वेटेड एसेट, नॉट रिस्क वेटेड एसेट, इट इज टोटल रिस्क। आई होप आपको पता है दोनों में क्या डिफरेंस है। अब अगर मान लो लेट्स सपोज यू हैव गिवन 100 crore rupees of loan, 100 crore rupees of loan in the home loan category, and according to the internal audits, bank is estimating the risk of 50%, which means the risk weighted asset is what value? So it is 50 crores. So when you calculate capital to risk weighted asset ratio, in that particular case, you will be writing capital upon 50 crores, and this ratio should be greater than or equals to 9%. But leverage ratio के केस में you will write capital upon total risk. So what is total risk? So total exposure. What is total exposure? जो पैसा लोन पे दिया सारा ही exposure है. So that is divided by 100 crores. So this, as per Basel norms, it is required to be greater than 3%. RBI said no. In India it should be greater than or equals to 3.5%. But for domestic systematically important bank, it should be greater than or equals to 4%. RBI ये चाह रहा है from SBI, ICICI, HDFC, RBI ये चाह रहा है from the other banks. Banks कहते हैं छोड़ो सर, we give you almost double 7.9%. You enjoy. Almost double 7.9%. So don't worry, you enjoy. तो बैंक की जो capital growth है, that is more than the RWA growth, because of which this ratio is increasing at a high rate. Because of which this ratio is increasing at a high rate. समझ आ गई बात? तो ये पूरे का पूरा डेटा है जो आपको याद रखना है। I'm pretty sure you will be able to memorize it. If the context is clear, just give me yes sir so that we can move ahead. One second, guys. Okay. Moving to the next point. So this is the same which we have already discussed. So overall, capital adequacy ratio is 7.3%. Highest is for foreign banks. तो ये ट्रेंड भी याद रखो. कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो का ट्रेंड इज फॉरेन बैंक, प्राइवेट बैंक एंड पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक. ग्रॉस एनपीए का ट्रेंड था पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक, प्राइवेट बैंक एंड फॉरेन बैंक. So this was the trend for gross NPA and this is the trend for CAR, which is important. You need to remember. Tier 1 के लिए 14.7 and Tier 1 trend is also the same. इसे ना भी याद रखोगे तो भी चलेगा. Tier 1 leverage ratio is 7.9%. Trend is not important. बस ये this and this trend along with gross NPA trend. If you remember this, you will be in a position to answer the most beautiful questions which can be framed by RBI Grade B examiner. अगर ऐसा question examiner ने बना दिया, most of the students will not be answer, but I think those who are attending this session, they will be able to answer these kind of questions as well. तो मैंने ये पूरी आपको story सुना दी. I have already explained it. You can just check it once. I have taken a real life example. See, assume a bank has given 1000 crore of housing loan, risk is 50%. 1000 crore rupees of government bond, risk is 0%. 500 crore rupees of corporate loan, 100% risk. 200 crore rupees of off balance sheet risk, that is guarantee. This is 200 crores. If I talk about RWA, in case of RWA, we only include balance sheet risk. We don't include the off balance sheet risk. उसमें भी with weightage. 50% weightage, 1000 into 50%. 0% risk, 1000 into 0. And 100% risk, that is 500 into 100. तो जो आपका टोटल 2500 करोड़ रुपए का लोन है, उस पे जो रिस्क वेटेड असेट है वो कितना है, दैट इज 1000 करोड़. और यहाँ पे यू विल यूज दिस फॉर CAR, बट इन केस ऑफ लिवरेज रेशियो वी इंक्लूड बैलेंस शीट एज वेल एज ऑफ बैलेंस शीट एक्सपोजर. एक्सपोजर मतलब रिस्क, नॉट रिस्क वेटेड असेट. ये भी रिस्क है, ये भी रिस्क है, ये भी रिस्क है, ये भी रिस्क है. टोटल 2700 करोड़ रिस्क है और इसके बेसिस पे यू विल कैलकुलेट द लिवरेज वैल्यू. क्लियर हो गया? अगली बार लिवरेज रेशियो और कैपिटल एडिक्वेसी रेशियो में जो कहीं ना कहीं कंफ्यूजन था, आई होप इट इज रिजॉल्व. अगर ना हो, इस PDF को पढ़ लेना, 2 बार पढ़ लेना, क्लियर हो जाएगा. जिंदगी में दोबारा ये डाउट नहीं आएगा. मूविंग ऑन टू द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, दैट इज प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी मैट्रिक्स. इफ आई टॉक अबाउट द प्रॉफिटेबिलिटी, सो प्रॉफिट आफ्टर टैक्स overall is 16.9%. It is 16.9%. For public sector bank, it is amazing 31.8%. इसीलिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, याद कर लेना. प्राइवेट सेक्टर बैंक का प्रॉफिट कम है पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक से, बस दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. डोंट रिमेंबर द डेटा, दैट इज 9.2%. बस ये ट्रेंड याद रख लेना, दैट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. डेटा यही दोनों याद रखना, दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट. देन पब्लिक सेक्टर बैंक प्रॉफिट ड्राइवर्स आर स्ट्रॉन्ग. Other operating income, profit for the private banks has decreased due to the rising operating expense. Sir, employees की salary pretty high. The standard they are maintaining, the infrastructure they are maintaining, it is pretty high. In case of what? Sir, in case of your private banks, because of which the operating cost has increased, and this has happened. Net interest margin has declined. I have already discussed what is NIM. So NIM for public sector banks is 3%. For private banks 4%, for foreign banks 4.1%, and this overall is 3.5%. This data is very, very important. Do remember that, which can be asked directly in the examination. Now I hope you remember liquidity coverage ratio. What is liquidity coverage ratio? So it is basically high quality liquid asset divided by net cash outflow in 30 days during stress period. So during stress period, whatsoever is expected to be the net cash outflow, if I divide it with high quality liquid asset, that is government security, treasury bills and all, it should be greater than or equals to 100%. And yes, for Indian banks, it is more than 100%, that is 132%, which is a good call, which is a good percentage, which is a good value. Net stable funding ratio is basically stable funds with the bank which can be liquidated, or the assets of the bank which can be liquidated in next 12 months divided by liabilities of the bank which are going to be serviced in next 12 months. तो जो अगले 12 महीने में आपकी जितनी भी लाइबिलिटीज हैं उसको जब आप स्टेबल फंड से कंपेयर करें, दैट शुड बी अगेन ग्रेटर देन इक्वल्स टू 100%, एंड दिस इज 126.3% फॉर द एंटायर शेड्यूल्ड कमर्शियल बैंक्स. अगेन इट इज अ गुड डेटा, अगेन इट इज अ गुड वैल्यू. Moving on to the next point, this is the conclusion, whatever we have discussed till now. देखो, gross NPA 2.3%, net NPA 0.5%, return on asset 1.4%, capital to risk weighted asset ratio 17.3%, liquidity coverage ratio 132.6%, provision coverage ratio 76.3%, slippage percent annualized is 1.4. जो मैंने आपको डेटा दिया था 0.7, दैट वाज सेमी एनुअल, मतलब वो हाफ ईयर था. हाफ ईयरली वाज 0.7% एंड एनुअल इज 1.4%, विच इज स्टिल स्टेबल, विच इज स्टिल एक्सेप्टेबल. डन हो गया. इज इट फाइन टिल नाउ? Is it fine till now? No more doubt? Give me yes, sir. And if you haven't hit the like button, guys, do hit the like button. Let's move on to the second part. The second part is we have discussed what is the current status of scheduled commercial banks. दिखने में काफी strong लग रहा है. दिखने में इंडिया के जो scheduled commercial banks हैं, they are pretty strong. Now let's check whether they are strong or not. तो फिर क्या हुआ? Then these banks, they underwent stress test, and after the stress test, what was the result? But first, what is macro stress test? It is basically stimulation used by RBI to test banks' capability to stand strong against economic shock, or how capable bank is to absorb the economic shock, focused on worst case macroeconomic conditions, which include credit risk, market risk, as well as interest risk. If I talk about this test, it was conducted on 46 scheduled commercial banks, that is of which include 98% of the total asset, but it do not include RRBs. Data which is discussed, it is up to 2025. तो इस मार्च 2025 के डेटा पर टेस्ट किया गया, और टेस्ट करके ये जो प्रोजेक्शन की गई, दैट इज फॉर अ नेक्स्ट 2 years, कि नेक्स्ट 2 years में जो भी स्ट्रेस होगा, उस स्ट्रेस की वजह से 2 सालों के बाद बैंक की हालत क्या होगी. No recapitalization is required, no future regulatory changes are required, which means Indian banking structure is strong. कोई पैसा गवर्नमेंट का नहीं चाहिए, कोई रेगुलेटरी मेजर चेंजेस नहीं चाहिए, बिकॉज बैंक्स हैव परफॉर्म्ड रियली वेरी वेल. अब इसमें 3 पॉइंट्स हैं, पॉइंट ऑफ रेफरेंस. फर्स्ट इज बेसलाइन सिनेरियो, व्हिच मींस जैसा आज है अगर वैसा ही चले. आरबीआई फोरकास्ट मॉडरेट एक्सपेक्टेड कंडीशंस. एडवर्स सिनेरियो 1, दैट इज जियोपॉलिटिकल रिस्क, which means high inflation, global volatility. This is scenario 1. दूसरा जो रिस्क है, that can be scenario 2, which is global growth slowdown, trade slowdown हो गया, financial shock है, global GDP is all time low, उसका impact इंडियन इकोनॉमी पे या इंडियन बैंकिंग सेक्टर्स पे क्या होगा. तो हमारे पास जो रिजल्ट निकला, वो रिजल्ट ये है कि अगर आप ध्यान से देखें, I'll just remove my image. I'll just remove my image and I'll go one by one, otherwise it will be confusion. It will be confusing for you. So हमारा जो आज CRAR है, that is 17.2%. अब अगर situation ऐसी ही रही, no major changes, no adverse effect, we move on as per the expectations, so this CAR will fall to 17%, which is good enough, which is still good enough. लेकिन अगर adverse scenario 1 हुआ, if it would have been adverse scenario 1, it will drop to 14.2%, which means अगर geopolitical tensions बढ़ी, our CAR will fall to 14.2, which means RWA बढ़ जाएगा और दूसरी तरफ कैपिटल कम हो जाएगा, तो ये रेशियो भी कम होगी. एंड इन केस ऑफ the second category, in case of the second adverse scenario, which we call it as global growth slowdown, उसकी वजह से जो resultant CAR होगा after 2 years, it will be 14.6%, which is again pretty good. If I talk about with respect to tier 1, with respect to tier 1, it is expected to increase on normal conditions. 12.5, 12.9, again acceptable. In case of gross NPA, on same lines, it will increase marginally to 2.5%, but in adverse scenario 1, it will increase to 5.6, and in inverse scenario 2, it will increase to 5.3%. तो ये दो डेटास, सॉरी ये जो तीन टेबल्स हैं, they are important, which can help you majorly in writing a descriptive answer. But हाँ, अगर direct question examination में आ गया paragraph format पे, तो this data will help you. Clear है ना? अरे समझ आ गया ना हुआ क्या? ये वो है कि आज की कंडीशन पर हमने टेस्ट किया और हमने कहा if everything remains same, you will be at this point. If it is adverse scenario 1, you will be at this point. If it will be adverse scenario 2, you will be at this point. And all these three conditions, they are still stable. They are still stable, which shows that Indian banks, they have a capacity to absorb the economic shocks pretty well if it occurs in the near future. If the economic shocks occurs in the near future, they can be managed pretty well as per the current financial health of the banking sector. Is it done? Is it done, guys? Give me yes or. Do reply actively, guys. Give me a thumbs up if it is clear so that I can move ahead. चलो, moving on to the next. अब आया urban cooperative banks की बारी. So first is, let's talk about the current conditions of the urban cooperative banks, and then we will be checking out the result of test on the urban cooperative banks. Credit growth rate urban cooperative banks की is 7.4%. Segment wise credit growth rate is observed in both scheduled urban cooperative banks as well as non-scheduled urban cooperative banks. CRAR is 18%, which is very good. Then tier wise capital position has also improved. Asset quality, gross NPA is 6.1%, जो कि scheduled commercial bank की थी 2.3%. Net NPA जो कि 0.5 था, it is 0.6% in this case. तो इसका मतलब huge provisioning is maintained by the urban cooperative banks to counter its NPAs. Large borrowers gross NPA ratio declined. Now they are only 23.2%. If I talk about the provisioning coverage ratio, very high. जैसा कि मैंने आपको कहा, यहीं देख लो ना, gross NPA 6.1%, net NPA 0.6. इससे बहुत clear हो रहा है कि your provisioning is pretty high. So you can see this provisioning value is 91% of the NPA value. Net interest margin is 3.6%. So whatever I have encircled, these data are important. Rest you can ignore. These data are important. Rest you can ignore. अगर आप चाहो तो ये ignore कर देना. Large borrower वाला, that is not important. अब इसके data पढ़ लेते हैं one by one. Credit growth 7.4%, CRAR 18%, GNPA ratio 6.1%, net NPA ratio 0.6%, provisioning coverage ratio 91%, and then net interest margin is 3.6%. तो ये जो 5 ग्राफ थे, इनका कंक्लूजन मैंने यहाँ टेबुलर फॉर्म में बनाकर आपको दे दिया. ये टेबल मैंने बनाया है, किसी ने मेरे लिए बनाया नहीं है. नो वन हैज क्रिएटेड दिस फॉर मी. दिस हैज बीन क्रिएटेड बाय मी फॉर यू ऑल गाइज, सो दैट यू कैन यूज इट फॉर योर फ्यूचर रेफरेंस. इट इज़ नॉट दी कॉपी एंड पेस्ट फ्रॉम दी रिपोर्ट डायरेक्टली. तो रिपोर्ट को सिंप्लीफाई करके कॉन्साइज मैनर में प्रेजेंट किया है, सो दैट यू कैन find out the data very accurately and you can remember it. Last but not the least is stress testing. If I talk about the stress testing on the urban cooperative banks, in case of urban cooperative banks, ऊपर से बात करेंगे. Overall system CRAR remains above regulatory threshold, so it's okay. Only one tier 4 urban cooperative bank has shown vulnerability under extreme credit related shocks. Rest, they are strong. Tier 1 urban cooperative banks are well capitalized but vulnerable to liquidity risk. तो जो Tier 1 urban cooperative banks हैं, they are vulnerable to liquidity risk. Tier 4 urban cooperative banks are strong enough to fight against credit related risk except only one bank. The name is not important. Stress scenario helps identify pockets of vulnerability. So pockets of vulnerability हमने find out कर ली. Tier 1 के केस में liquidity risk है. Tier 4 के केस में एक ही बैंक है जो credit risk के केस में थोड़ा सा अच्छा perform नहीं करेगा. Rest all urban cooperative banks, they are stable in, I would say, as a whole, they are stable. Moving on to NBFCs in a same tabular form. Year on year credit growth for NBFCs is 20.7%. Key drivers are upper layer growth, which is aided by housing finance conversions and NBFCs mergers. तो ये credit growth क्यों हुआ? So because of the NBFCs जो बहुत तेजी से merge हुए, as well as the upper layer NBFCs, which has been aided by the housing finance companies conversions into NBFCs. Infrastructure finance companies credit growth has increased. Microfinance institutes portfolio has contracted. क्यों contract हो गया? क्योंकि सर आपने काफी सारे points introduce कर दिए. If you remember, we have discussed a master direction given by RBI with respect to microfinance institutes. तो जब आपने norms hard कर दी, तो obviously my lending capacity, my capacity to cater the customers will fall, जिसकी वजह से this is at a downtrend. Sectoral credit trends, credit weakened in all the sectors except services. Agriculture credit contracted. Unsecured personal loan growth significantly slowed, which is good क्योंकि unsecured loan है. Microfinance and small finance loan contracted. Gold loan has witnessed rapid growth. क्यों? क्योंकि gold का price बहुत तेजी से बढ़ा. And if the price of gold is increasing at a very high rate, obviously urban cooperative banks, they are in a position to manage, they are in a position to provide the loan in an appropriate manner. ठीक है जी? Is this point clear? If it is clear till this point, just give me yes sir. कोई doubt है यहाँ तक तो पूछ लो. Then I'll move ahead. We are left with few more points. I'll take 10 more minutes and I'll conclude the discussion. Keep on replying. Okay, fine. So now let's move on to the next segment. The next segment after this particular point is after NBFCs is NBFC के बाद जो अगला point है जहां से हम we will move forward. That is basically we'll discuss the parameters of NBFCs. After discussing some more parameters, we'll discuss the result of stress test on the NBFCs, and then we will be completing the chapter 2. I'll just move on to the next slide. So the next slide is improved levels of lending capacity. Asha, what does this word means? Have you heard this word earlier? किसी ने सुना ये वर्ड पहले? Any idea? So it is basically we talk about bad or something which is not good, something which is not good. So the bad levels has been, or I would say the levels of upper layer and middle layer, they have improved. They have improved over the previous datas we have. Next is provision coverage ratio of middle layer is more than upper layer. Government owned NBFC's middle layer has improved to 1.4%. GNPA, that is gross that is gross NPA of private NBFC middle layer is stable, 5.2%. Agriculture sector contributed to 3.4% of total NBFC's gross NPA. System level CRAR is 25.8%. Net interest margin is again 8% for upper layer and middle layer 4%. Profitability is again good, but the profitability of middle layer has declined sharply in the past. Now, if I talk about some of the parameters in this, short-term liabilities, it is high in case of upper layer in comparison to middle layer. Long-term assets 55%, and in case of middle layer it is 66%. Bank funding dependency ratio has decreased, which is good, and here obviously the dependency is low. Public deposit dependency higher in case of upper layer, but it is pretty low in case of middle layer. तो यहाँ से समझ ये आता है कि जो upper layer है उससे काफी ज्यादा strong है हमारा middle layer NBFCs as a whole. So NBFCs, especially the upper layer, they have drove credit expansion, but middle layer saw sector-wide slowdown, especially in unsecured and microfinance segment. But it's good because it has improved their parameters. Asset quality has improved, but agriculture NPA is still high. NBFC upper layer are more vulnerable on liquidity front in comparison to middle layer. Sector shows overall financial health fine, but layer specific stress pockets still persist. If you don't know what is upper layer, base layer, mid layer, so this is the chart. You can just read it. I'll not be discussing this because I've already covered in the past. So credit growth 20.7%, activity based credit growth 17.7%. Then if I talk about the overall gross NPA ratio 3%, and provisioning coverage ratio is 66.2%. बस इतना याद रख लीजिएगा, that is more than sufficient. Stress test की बात करें तो stress test में भी they have performed really very well. उस performance के point of view से just read it. लेकिन यहाँ पे जो stress test है उसका कंपैरिजन एक साल के लिए किया गया, मतलब आज अगर हमने टेस्ट किया तो एक साल के बाद कहानी क्या होगी वो बात की गई है. बेसलाइन की बात करें तो योर ग्रॉस एनपीए विल इंक्रीज, CRAR will decrease. 10 NBFCs all in middle layer will breach CRAR requirements. मीडियम रिस्क में हायर प्रोविजनिंग करनी होगी, डिक्रीज होगा CRAR एडिशनली बाय 0.8%, और शार्प सिवियर रिस्क में ये डिक्रीज होगा बाय एडिशनली 1%, और 15 के 15 all middle layer NBFCs they are going to breach CRAR, but on the other fronts they are still manageable in terms of short term lending issues and all. Then if I talk about the last point of this particular chapter, that is mutual fund. तो mutual fund की भी testing की गई, mutual fund sector की भी. That testing is not important, उसका बस एक basic structure important है, मैं उतना ही deliver करूंगा. सेबी ने mandate किया ये testing को, ये conduct किया गया by asset management company. All the open-ended debt schemes were covered. Risk tested, रिस्क जो टेस्ट किए गए वो है इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क, क्रेडिट रिस्क और लिक्विडिटी रिस्क. फ्रीक्वेंसी है मंथली, और अगर हम बात करें फ्रीक्वेंसी इज इंपॉर्टेंट, क्वेश्चन आ सकता है. थ्रेशोल्ड जो सेट किया गया इट वाज सेट बाय एसेट मैनेजमेंट कंपनी, एंड ब्रीच कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस मस्ट बी रिपोर्टेड एंड द रिक्वायर्ड एक्शन इज नीड टू बी टेकन. तो सारे के सारे म्यूचुअल फंड्स रेगुलरली they go under this test risk as well as liquidity stress. In April 2025, 43 debt schemes crossed risk limits, but corrective actions were quickly taken. Top AMCs, that is asset management companies, they mostly compliant with the liquidity standards, and equity schemes like small caps, they take longer to sell larger portfolio chunks in the stress situation. तो ये मैंने आपको पूरे के पूरे keywords दे दिए हैं जो कि इस पूरे stress से आपके लिए इंपॉर्टेंट हो सकते हैं. क्वेश्चन आने के चांसेस कम है, बट आया तो यहां से बाहर नहीं आएगा. लास्ट इज द इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर, और इंश्योरेंस सेक्टर के सॉल्वेंसी रेशियो की बात हुई है, सॉल्वेंसी स्टेटस। व्हाट इज द सॉल्वेंसी स्टेटस? एक इंश्योरेंस कंपनी ने आज एक कार का लोन किया, दिस कार लोन इज ऑफ लेट्स से 10 लाख रुपीस, मतलब in near future car owner can ask for a claim of 10 lakhs. In that particular case, insurance company must hold asset of 150%, which means insurance company must hold 15 lakh rupees in the form of asset in order to counter this risk in near future. In order to counter this risk in near future according to IRDAI. So what is solvency ratio? It measures the insurer's ability to pay future claims, which means insurance company assets divided by risk on the insurance company. So minimum requirement is 150% as per IRDAI. मैं नहीं बोल रहा. Why it matters? Because जितना ज़्यादा ये रेशियो होगा उतनी better capability होगी of an insurance company to generate the claim or to settle down the claims. अगर हम इसमें इंश्योरेंस टाइप की बात करें तो लाइफ इंश्योरेंस कंपनीज की, if I talk about the life insurance companies, they have a solvency ratio of 204%, non-life 166%, और जो overall average है that is obviously above 150%, which is above the threshold requirement, which is above the threshold requirement. ठीक है जी, clear हो गया point, समझ आ गया? If this point is clear, just give me yes sir. So this is all about योर चैप्टर 2. चैप्टर 2 का एक पार्ट है जो मैंने इंटेंशनली यहाँ पे छुपा लिया आपके सामने, बिकॉज इट रिक्वायर्स मच मोर डिटेल. आई थिंक यू आर एग्जॉस्टेड टिल नाउ, सो वो मैं नेक्स्ट क्लास में वहीं से शुरू कर लूंगा. दैट इज रिलेटेड टू इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस इन फाइनेंशियल सेक्टर. फर्स्ट आई एक्सप्लेन यू व्हाट इज इंटरकनेक्टेडनेस, हाउ इट इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर अस, इसमें हमें क्या पता होना चाहिए. ये वाला पार्ट वी विल डिस्कस इन द नेक्स्ट सेशन एंड देन विल डिस्कस चैप्टर 3. तो अगला जो सेशन होगा मेजरली चैप्टर 3 पे डिस्कशन होगा, प्लस लास्ट पार्ट होगा चैप्टर 2 का, और प्लस उसमें 20 to 25 MCQs होंगे. ऑब्वियसली वो जो MCQs हैं दैट विल बी फ्रॉम पार्ट 1, पार्ट 2 एंड पार्ट 3 ओनली. तो आज इस PDF को you can download from the Telegram channel, do revise it again and again so that you can answer those questions in the Sunday session. तो आपको एक confidence भी मिलेगा that yes you are in a position to answer the questions, so that you can get that trust on you कि I can answer these questions in the examination as well. Thank you so much for joining guys. We'll catch you in the upcoming sessions to go. Good luck. God bless you all. Take care.